was so enchanted, not only from the sound or from the music or the composition. It was, for me, it was more impressive to see this a human in front of me being so aligned with himself. I mean, the music, the instrument, and himself were one. The unity of the moment. This was so striking to me, and I said that moment was the moment that I said, I'm so jealous. I want to do the same. I felt this jealousy as a child that wants to play, with the toy, the same toy. And yes, just out of the blue, I said to myself, I want to do the same. And I had no idea what this is.
Hi, you're listening to Conversations with Musicians with Leah Roseman. Kelly Toma is a Cretan lira player, and this episode has beautiful music and a wide-ranging conversation, including Kelly's personal story of becoming a musician after training as a dancer, Cretan culture, the influence of Ross Daly and the Labyrinth Musical Workshop, which he founded in 1982. Kelly speaks so eloquently about her love of music and collaboration. I really appreciate this opportunity to have in-depth conversations with my musical guests. Please use the timestamps if you want to jump to any topics or music, but I hope you'll take the time to listen to the whole episode on your favorite podcast player or the video on my YouTube. The transcript and all the links to Kelly's projects are linked in the show notes on my website, leahroseman.com. Did you know that I'm an independent podcaster? The link to support this podcast and my YouTube channel is in the description. Every dollar helps me cover the costs of this huge project. Thanks so much. Kelly Toma, thanks so much for joining me today from Crete.
Exactly. Hello. Very nice to be here with you. Here, or we're not together, but we are somehow, right?
I was looking at pictures of where you live with the beautiful, huge mountains in the background, and
Yes,
looks quite incredible.
Yes. Well, they're not so huge if you compare them to mountains. They look like little hills. We live in the village where I live. We call it mountain, but it's actually a very, very small mountain called Yuchtas. And we are very close to this mountain, but we do have taller mountains in Heraklion, in Chania. We have very, very big mountains, which are full of snow right now. Although we have 20 degrees today, they are full of snow, and they stay in snow until the summer. And it's actually very interesting to swim in the sea on Crete and look at the mountains full of snow. It's very, very special.
So you play the lira, and this is, when I mentioned this to some colleagues, they said, oh, you mean the Greek lyre? I said, no, completely different.
There is always this confusion. There is always this confusion with people that are not familiar with this instrument. It actually has the same name, lira. Also in Greek, we call it ancient Greek lyra, archaea lyra. It is exactly the same word, the same name, but it refers to a completely different instrument. The ancient Greek lyra, as we have it depicted or painted on wall paintings, it's something like a harp. It has absolutely nothing to do with the contemporary, the Cretan lira, which is a bowed instrument, and it has nothing to do with it. But this is something that happens a lot in musicology, let's say. There are many, common words for instruments that are completely different. Like, for example, tambura. Tambura can be from the same root. There are instruments which are percussion instruments and plucked instruments. It comes from the same root, but they're completely different family.
Yes, I have run across that with that word, and I've wondered about that. Mm-hmm. And I was looking into like the Mongolian horsehead fiddle, which is another bowed instrument that it's the same technique that you use, where you're making contact with the back of your finger.
Mm-hmm.
So I know you've generously agreed to let me use some of your previously recorded music so people can really hear the beauty of the sound. But for right now, if you could just show us basically the technique for those watching the video.
Yes.
And for those who are listening, Kelly, if you could just describe it so that they can
Yes.
picture in their mind.
There is a lot to describe on this strange creation here, structure. This specific lira, which I play, is actually a modified version of the traditional Cretan lira, the traditional instrument. This version was created by my teacher, Ross Daly. His name is Ross Daly. It was created more than 30 years ago. And it was created basically for his own needs. He never expected that this instrument would become popular or that other people would like to play it. But it has become very popular. I don't know how many there are, how many have been constructed until today, but I know a lot of people that play it, and a lot of people that are creating new music on it. So in a way, it has started its own tradition, this instrument. It is traditional. If we consider, if we think that the word tradition actually means transferring the information from generation to generation, or from, from person to person, in a way, this is it is definitely a traditional instrument. So there are a lot of similarities to the traditional Cretan lira, but a lot of special new elements, which I will describe. Actually, I have a traditional Cretan lira here as well to show you, to see the differences. Already from the shape, you see the differences. Let me try to hold both of them. So these are both. They are both, as we say, pear-shaped. They have this pear-shaped body here. They have the soundboard. They are knee fiddles, as we call them. They are played, the instrument is vertical like this, and the bow is played horizontally like that. But this instrument, the traditional Cretan lira, has 3 playing strings tuned in fifths, only 3 playing strings, and the modified instrument that Ross created has the 3 playing strings as well as sympathetic strings, the number of which varies. It can be from 8 to 22. Actually, as many as you can fit on the head of the instrument. So the sympathetic strings are thinner strings which are located, or they are located, I don't know, under the basic strings, and they resonate with the notes that you play on the 3 playing strings. The other differences between the traditional lira and this lira are the tuning pegs. You see, these tuning pegs are long, whereas these ones are, these mechanic tuning pegs of I don't know, banjo. I think, completely different. This means
Yeah.
that the instrument is sitting on a totally different way on the body of the player. You see, the pegs are sitting on my chest like that, so the position of the instrument is completely different than this. This is much closer to my body, which means that the position of my left hand is also a lot different. So the most characteristic thing about the technique of the Cretan lira is the fact that we do not press the string like we do on a violin. We don't play with the tip of our fingers, but we play, as you described earlier about this other instrument, we play with our nails. We push the string by the side of the string with our nails. You don't have to push very hard. It's not a very strong push, because if you do push it too hard, then the string, how can I say, it bends, and you have to find the right amount of pressure so that the sound is clear. And these strings, of course, are very, very tight, because as you see, they are not touching the soundboard, they are above the soundboard. They're very tight. We use cello strings. There are special strings for lira as well. I use cello strings, which are quite thick. They have a warm sound. So we change the tonality, we change the notes by putting our fingers next to the string and just pressing the string, but not too hard. And we change the notes like that. Yes. And of course, as we said, it's a bowed instrument, so we use a bow like this. And there are also bows with bells on them for rhythmic, for rhythmic dancing.
Okay.
Yes, they adjust bells on parts of the wood, and you have this percussion. You have a percussion instrument playing along with the lira. So yes, unfortunately, the sound of this microphone is not so good. But I will just play just to show how we change the tonality. So I don't know how this was, but the existence of sympathetic strings. So the sympathetic strings, what they do is they prolong is the word, like they extend the sound of the note that you play, because these strings are tuned in various notes, and they extend the sound, creating like a natural reverb in a way.
Yeah. So at this point, we'll probably insert one of your pieces, and you do so many collaborations with so many wonderful musicians. You mentioned Ross Daly, and I'm sure we'll talk about him. I know you've done some duo things with him. Is that something we'd be able to use? One of those, or
Yes. We have. There are videos, or there is a lot of music. Actually, we have created an album called Lunar, which is a duet album. You can definitely play some of this music.
yeah, it's beautiful. I've listened to it, and the sound of both of liras together. This first musical selection is from a 2017 concert with Ross Daly in a duo performance of Kelly's composition Anamkara on Cretan liras. It's excerpted from a concert, and the links to the original videos for all the musical selections in this episode are linked in the show notes on my website, leahroseman.com. So maybe this would be a great time to tell the story of how you first heard the lira.
Yes, yeah. Talking about this story, telling this story, it's something I've done so many times. But the truth is that it somehow gives me a strength to talk about it. I don't know. We musicians and artists in general, we very often tend to question ourselves, and we go through periods that we don't know what we are doing. We make music and we don't know who wants to listen to it. Why am I here? All these, questions. But when you go back to the beginning of all this, it somehow all clears out. It's all clear again. So I will tell you the story once more. I've said this to so many friends of mine, but really, it's quite interesting. Maybe it's interesting only for me, but if all of us, all artists, try to remember this first time that they were enchanted by this art that they are immersed into until today, maybe it will have the same result to them. To understand why and stop questioning. Just go forward and don't. So what happened with me is that I grew up in a family that we did not have music. Nobody in my family was a musician or an artist. Actually, my younger sister was playing the accordion at school, and she was the musician in the family. I was the dancer. I did classical ballet and contemporary dance for many years. So this was my thing. This was the thing I was good at. Music was not at all something that I was interested in to play. I was listening to music. I was listening to, because I was studying classical ballet, I was listening to some of the classical, Western classical music, but only the music that was created for dance. So I didn't have any knowledge about the composers, or to be honest, it was a bit superficial, my knowledge or my listening of this music. I was mostly listening to American pop music because this was what my friends were listening to, and so I was listening to any kind of music that was around. At the age of 13, 14, 15, I was going to parties and listening to music like, at that time we had Madonna, Michael Jackson, this kind of things, but not really. I didn't really feel like. I didn't have any strong connection to all that. It was quite superficial. I was listening to it just because my friends were listening to it. But I bought albums, I had my collection and all this. And when I was 15 years old, I happened to listen for the first time to one of Ross's compositions. And yeah, this was this made a huge change in my life. It like opened a whole new world for me. And the way it happened was quite accidental. I was coming back from. I remember I was 15 years old, and I was coming back from my English class. Walking back home, and it was, I don't know, September or October. So the balcony doors were open in my house. So I was walking, going to go inside my house, and the balcony doors were open. So from my house, there was music coming, uh, a beautiful, beautiful music, which was like, for me, it was like listening to music for the first time. 15 years old, for the first time, I listened. I listened to something that clicked my heart. And yes, I listened to that, and I just stood outside my house, and I was listening to this thing that I had never listened before. I couldn't recognize it. I couldn't associate it to anything that I had listened before. It was afterwards, a few weeks after, I figured out that it was a little baglama, jura saz, a little instrument, a little plucked instrument called jura, and a percussion, a bendir. It took me months or maybe a year to figure out exactly the names of these instruments actually, and what this music was exactly, what it was. But that day when I went in my house, a little bit, you know, stoned in a way, I went into my house and I said, I asked my sister who had the music on. I said, what is this music? And she said that it was a compilation cassette that a friend of hers had sent her from Paris, and it was a compilation cassette with many different compositions. One Cretan song, one song from Yugoslavia, this one of Ross. But there was no information. It was a pirate cassette, of course. This we used to make a lot back then. It was a pirate cassette with no information of what was its track. So we had to find out what was that, and I asked my sister to call her friend in France to ask her what it was. You know, back then we couldn't just Google things. We didn't go to Spotify, you know. So we had no idea, and this was a magical period for me. And you know, months after that, after I discovered this music and I listened to it a lot, and I discovered to other kinds of music as well. And I still didn't start to play the lira. I remember that I was listening to music in a totally different way than I'm listening to it now. So, you know, I was listening to music without having any association in my head about what is this instrument, where is it from, who is playing. This freedom of listening to music without having any connotation, any ready material, is something very precious, which unfortunately I cannot go back to. And as a musician, I feel I lost this this ability, you know, being like a baby listener. It's something you lose. Of course, you gain a lot more, you gain a lot of knowledge, you listen to music on a totally different way, maybe in a more mature way. But mature doesn't necessarily mean better or worse, or it's a different way, different way. Anyway, to cut the story short, after I discovered that after my sister called her friend and she said that this is the music of a man called Ross Daly, and that she said that he's an American musician, that he lives in America and he loves Greek music and he played Greek music. So I knew nothing about all this. So any little information, I just believed it. Ross is not American, Ross is Irish. What I heard was not Greek traditional music. It was a composition of his own, the genre of which we call today contemporary modern music. Anyway, but any little information for me was precious. So after that, I went to record shops and asked for more information, tried to find LPs of Ross, and slowly, I found I found out that he is Irish and that he actually lived in Athens, where I lived. So, although it was very difficult back then, because as I tell you, we didn't have easy access to all this information, no internet. Our only source of information was actually newspapers. I'm talking about 93, 94, you know. We only had newspapers back then, and if we wanted to see or magazines, where an artist is performing, we would read it on the news. So I tried to follow him, and yes, slowly, I found on the newspaper. Actually, no, I saw a poster on the street that he was performing in a small neighborhood close to where I lived, and this is the first time I listened to Ross playing live. Already, 1 year had passed already. During which I was listening to his music a lot. I had found a lot of his LPs and listened over and over and over this music, which I didn't know much about. I didn't know if it was traditional, if it was new composition, if it was from Greece, from India, from Timbuktu. I don't know. I had no no clues, and that was great. That was really great. I think that this helps a lot the magic around all this, this discoveries in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And the first time I went to one of his concerts then in Moshato area, somewhere very close to the area where I lived. He played many instruments that night. It was actually him. He was sitting in the middle, and two more musicians were playing with him. One percussionist and a legendary percussionist from Iran, Jamshid Shemirani. He plays the zarb, the goblet drum, traditional goblet drum from Iran. And the other musician was a student of Ross, who is a very acknowledged musician, one of my big heroes in music, Socrates Sinopoulos, who played the kemençe, the Turkish lira. A lira again, but a different lira. So Ross was in the middle, Socrates was on the right, and Jamshid was on the left. And it was the first time that I saw these instruments in real life. I saw them from close. First time.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, first time to listen to this music live. I had only listened to this on my LP, and the impact was I can't describe to you what the impact was that night. For me, it was a revelation. Another big revelation, like the day I listened to this first piece of Ross's music, and. I remember I was watching Socrates, the lira player. He was a little bit, profile, a little bit tilted. How do you say tilted like that? So I could see that the lira, I could see the shape of the lira from the side, and I saw that the lira was thin. The lira is not deep. It doesn't have a deep. You see, it's very thin.
Yeah.
And it was the first time I saw that because I had only seen it facing in pictures, in photos.
Right.
And I was so shocked. I didn't imagine. I didn't even know what the instrument looked like. And that night, Ross played many instruments because he's a multi-instrumentalist. He played the baglama, the rabab, the Afghan rabab, and the saz, the baglama, the Afghan rabab, and the lira. I think these three instruments. And when he played the lira, I was again. I cannot. I don't know if I can find the words, but I was so enchanted, not only from the sound or from the music or the composition. It was for me. It was more impressive to see this a human in front of me being so aligned with himself. I mean, the music, the instrument, and himself were one. The unity, the unity of the moment. This was so striking to me, and I said that moment was the moment that I said, I'm so jealous. I want to do the same. I felt this jealousy as a child that wants to play, with the toy, the same toy.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, just out of the blue, I said to myself, I want to do the same. And I had no idea what this is. I so far I never had the will to play an instrument, never. But that moment, watching Ross playing the lira, especially the lira, I said, I want to do the same. And of course, I, I don't know why I said that, because to say I want to become a musician, for me it was it made absolutely no sense. I was a student at school. I was studying dance very seriously. That was my dream, and my plans were to become a dancer or a dance teacher. At that moment, I was sure, absolutely sure, I wanted to do that. I don't know why.
It's fascinating to me because I'm like a lot of Western classical musicians that we just, we start when we're a child and we just kind of follow this narrow path and we pursue music. But I've met so many guests through this series, like yourself, who just heard an instrument and just switched their life, often as young adults or later in life. It's fascinating to me. And I'm sure your discipline as a dancer helped you. with the discipline that you needed.
Yes, yes, yes. Because I was when I started having music lessons with Ross, I was already 17 years old, which is for an instrument player, it's quite late. As you know, as a classical musician,
Mm-hmm.
that your training starts much earlier, right? Although I didn't have any stress about, because I didn't plan, to become a professional musician. That was not my plan. So I didn't
Mm-hmm.
have any stress about developing a very good technique or being very good at it. I just enjoyed it so much. I enjoyed it very,
Mm-hmm.
very much. And I practiced a lot because I enjoyed it. I didn't practice it a lot because I thought I had to make up for the lost time. I didn't realize all that
Mm-hmm.
back then. I was so blind from from all this joy of being able to reproduce the sounds that I had fallen in love with, to reproduce even badly. It was so
Mm-hmm.
amazing for me that I didn't have time to think about virtuosity and all this. All this came much later, when I started performing, when I started meeting other musicians and see how useful is virtuosity, because it's just useful. Virtuosity is not music necessarily. Virtuosity is a useful tool to play
Mm-hmm.
music afterwards. But all these were things that I found out later. But as you say, because I was very disciplined as a dance student, I had to be, because classical dance and contemporary dance, which I studied for many, many years, since I was 6 years old, uh, I had created a muscle for discipline, which was very useful actually in music. And that's
Mm-hmm.
something that I took for granted, that I have to study. I have to repeat a lot of things, these movements on the lira, so that I create a
Mm-hmm.
muscle memory, on my fingers to do it well, as I did with my body when I studied dance. So
Mm-hmm.
if I had not studied dance, and if I did not have this kind of discipline, it might have been more difficult for me to just, dive in this huge ocean of music and know nothing about how you can progress. But I knew how you can progress, because I had seen that happening with my body, with dance. That if you repeat and if you have a little method, even your own method, find the way that you manage to learn faster or more constructively, you will reach a better result, and a better result, and better result. So it did help me a lot, dance did.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting what you're just saying, Kelly, about you have to find your own way, because I was thinking, you teach a lot now. Do you find, are you good at helping students find their way to learn that works for them?
Teaching has been a very big school for me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm studying as a student, and I'm also studying as a teacher. I mean, every teacher will say the same. I think. I'm sure every teacher will say the same. Um, Me, yes, I do have my own method of teaching myself. A very unorthodox method, I would say, that I'm not sure if it fits everyone. And when I started teaching, I realized that there is no system that fits all. You can you can propose your own way. You can try to project the information and try to give the information to the person that you have in front of you in one way or two ways, or try different ways. But the way they will receive it is their own job. And teaching and learning is a 50-50 procedure. I mean, a teacher cannot make miracles. The student has to do the other half of the way, and they have to meet. Because I studied music, and I still study music without written notation, without score. I
Mm-hmm.
teach the same way. So I teach through a lot of repetition. I love repetition. It's my meditation. A lot of repetition. And what I think happens is that you have different levels of study, of course, different levels of teaching. In one level of teaching, you have to repeat and create memory in your hands. This is not music. This is gymnastics, okay? This is not music, but you need this stage. If you don't go through this stage, you will waste a lot of time later, and you might be mature musically, you might want to express many things, but you don't have the tools if you don't go through the stage of building a certain technique. You have to, and it's actually nice. It's enjoyable to build a technique. For me, it's always been very enjoyable to play. To repeat and repeat and repeat and create exercises out of melodies. When I was studying with Ross, he showed me a lot of exercises, but unfortunately, I didn't do them back then. I was bored, because I wanted. When you're very enthusiastic in the beginning, you want to learn new pieces and learn new pieces. But what I did and what I still do is that I extracted parts of melodies, difficult parts or parts that were interesting, and create exercises out of them. Now I realize I should have done more of these exercises because now that I teach, I show a lot of them to my students and I see the results. So the method, there is definitely not one method. I don't have a one method. I have some anchors, some guidelines which I use because you have to, otherwise you will be lost. I have some guidelines that I use, but I definitely see every student as a totally different case. Of course, every student is different. And after you teach or you learn a technique, you have to find the right stage where there is a good balance between studying the technique, trying to become better and better in moving the fingers, basically. Because what is the instrument? The instrument is just wood and metal, and these are fingers. Okay, we move them, but the thing is, where is the music? This is not music. Where is the music? So you have to find the balance slowly, to study all this technique, but see beyond that and start to listen to the music. And listening to the music and digest it and become one with the music will finally project in your playing. What helps you in that is, I think, listening to a lot of music, having some people that inspire you around you. It's very, very important. For me, it was very, very important to have Ross. And then all these musicians around Ross, all these teachers in Labyrinth Musical Workshop, where I basically studied, all these musical personalities or human personalities, because all these are uh, wonderful people as well. They're not only musicians. All these personalities have inspired me and have affected me and my playing and who I am immensely. How is it a good word? I don't know. A lot, yes. Um, so you have to find the right balance, not to become very, strict and only play technique. And on the other hand, not just, fool around and yes, let's play a little bit music, la 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 la. You have to have both, to go on a path that you have discipline with joy, not discipline to punish yourself, discipline with joy and music as something sacred, something you go to. And you want to reach it, but you know that you will never reach it. And this is another, I think, it's a very beautiful feeling to know that you will never reach this sacred. There is no end. You will never go there, but you are walking towards it. This is something. This is my motivation, basically.
Yeah, that's beautifully said, Kelly. I definitely agree with you about that. Hi, just a quick break from the episode. I'm an independent podcaster and I really do need my listeners' help. Please consider buying me a coffee. The link to my Ko-fi page is in the description. Every dollar helps me cover the costs of this huge project. Thanks so much. You have so many beautiful musical collaborations. I was interested to talk to you about the
Yes,
cellist.
Mayu. Mayu Spiro. Mayu Spiro, yes. Mayu is a combination, she's a mosaic of she's the perfect mosaic. She's Jewish. She's Israeli. She's from Israel. Jewish. Her mother is Japanese. Her father is Iraqi, and her teacher was Russian. So she has the discipline, of her Russian teacher, very, very disciplined. She has the kindness and the calmness and the simple aesthetic and how can I say this genuine uh, kindness of Japanese culture and the Mediterranean Iraqi, fun. She's fun, she's kind and disciplined. She's perfect.
This is a duo performance with cellist Mayu Shviro, recorded in 2019. The original video on Kelly's channel is linked in my show notes.
She is a very, very high level musician, very high level. She studied. She first studied with started with classical Western music. She became a very, very virtuoso cellist. And when she was, I think, 17 or 18, she started being interested in Eastern music, and she studied Azeri music in Azerbaijan with a teacher on her cello. But really, um, if you ask, if you start asking me about all these collaborations I have with various musicians, I can talk more about their personalities than about how they play. And for me, Mayu is basically a wonderful person, and you can listen to it in her music. This is the result. The music is the result, but mainly she's a wonderful person, and this is very important.
So I've listened to some videos you've done with her in different formats, like duo,
Yes.
trio with percussion, quartet.
Mhm.
Is there any of that we'll be able to share with this episode? Would you
Ah,
have
yes,
permission?
yes. We have made duet. I don't know if there is a video of a duet. Yes, there are some rough videos. Unfortunately, we haven't managed to play in public a lot with Mayu in as a duet.
Mhm.
Uh, we have a very big repertoire together because when we meet, we just play a lot. We have a very, very big repertoire, but we didn't have the opportunity to present it officially in many venues. But I think we will in the future. There are a few videos on YouTube. We can choose either as a duet. We have a trio with Bijan Semirani. Bijan Semirani is one of the sons of Jamshid Semirani, the man that I saw that first concert of Ross
Okay.
30 years ago. And we have also videos with Mayo. I guess as a duet we have a couple, and as a quartet we have it with big orchestras. We can choose something. We'll see. We have a lot.
This is Flutter, one of Kelly Thoma's compositions, with her quartet. This video was shot in the Labyrinth Musical Workshop in Crete in 2019. The video with all the credits is linked to my show notes. Yeah, I love the sound combination. It's so great, and it's beautiful with the percussion too. It's very inspiring to me.
Yes,
Just the way you use the different textures.
yes.
So thanks. Hopefully, you'll have some new listeners after this.
Yes.
and and your quartet, the Toxo
Toxo, yes.
quartet. Am I
Toxo.
saying that?
Mhm.
Yes. And you have some upcoming projects with them
Yes, yes,
as
yes.
well.
Yes, with Toxo we've been working together for 15 years. We are celebrating our
Hmm.
15th year this year. We started out as girls, and we very often now we say, Rose says, "Ah, you have a tour with the girls, eh? We're not girls anymore, you know." But we were girls back then. It's been 15 years already. I can't believe it. We have played so much music together. They're also fantastic. Each one is such a special personality, and what made us work all these years together is the fact that the chemistry is so good between us. It clicked
Hmm.
so well from the beginning. The instruments, the combination of the instruments, also the frequencies, they work so well together that even from the beginning, 15 years ago when we first met, we found out that this will really work very well. First time we met in 2000, I think 8 was the first year, and we were together only for 4 or 5 days, and we had to create a project to present in a festival in Oslo. And in
Hmm.
4 days, we created so much material, so much repertoire. It was unbelievable. Uh, it's me with a lira, cello, classical cello, but Sigrun Eng, but she plays. She's very. How do you say? She plays different kinds of music as well. She's
Hmm.
classically trained, but she's been exploring other kinds of music. That's why she's very open, and she also works
Hmm.
without the score. This helps me a lot because
Hmm.
I don't use score, and it's very difficult for me to work with musicians that only work with scores because we are not on the same
Hmm.
page. I mean, they are on a page, and
Yeah.
I mean no
Yeah.
page. Yes, it's sometimes it's difficult with them. Although they are all classically trained and they read music, prima vista, in Toxo, we work without notation.
Hmm.
The other musician is also Norwegian. The cellist is Norwegian. The Hardanger fiddle player, the Norwegian violin player, Anahita. Hardanger fiddle is a violin with sympathetic strings. It's the traditional
Hmm.
fiddle of Norway. And the fourth girl is Eleanor Billy from France that studied the Swedish nyckelharpa. Nyckelharpa is
Hmm.
the traditional Swedish instrument with key plectrums and bow. So we all use bows, and that's why we call this ensemble toxo, which means bow in Greek. And we play our own original music. We play our own music, which is influenced from the various traditions that we have studied, or from it comes from us, or I don't know, from our experiences or from our backgrounds. But they have elements of Cretan music, Swedish music, Norwegian, a bit Celtic, or from nowhere, from Mars. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's we love it. We love playing together.
For the Toxo Quartet, we've included part of a beautiful compilation video from a few different songs. I encourage you to check out their recordings, which will also be linked in the show notes. And my regular listeners know that I'm a big fan of Bandcamp, and Toxo has 2 albums at the present
Yes.
time on Bandcamp that are really, really wonderful. I'll link to that. And also, people who haven't heard all my episodes might be interested. You've mentioned a few instruments that I've featured. So my very first interview was with a nickel harpa player,
I
Kirsty
see.
Money.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had a Comanche player and a Gadulka player. So some of these instruments that have come up,
Yes.
I've already featured, because as a violinist, I've always been fascinated with all the different, many, many bowed instruments there
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
in the world. And I'll continue to feature different bowed instruments.
Mhm. Well, the Gadulka is very similar to especially to this lira, the Cretan lira, the lira
Yeah.
with sympathetic strings, because it has sympathetic strings as well, and the shape
Mm-hmm.
of the instrument is very much like a Gadulka. Yeah. But in Gadulka,
Yeah.
if I remember correctly, the first string is played with the nails, like we do in the Cretan lira, but the other two are played not by pressing. You don't press the string all down to the soundboard, just the touching with the fingertips. Yes, it's a
Mm-hmm.
very unique instrument and unbelievable music. Very beautiful music, Bulgarian music.
Yeah. Yeah. So that musician is Kristina Belova, who,
Ah, yes, yes, yes,
and then
yes.
we had have you know of her?
Yeah, I know of her. Yes, of course.
Yeah. So your mother was Cretan, although you grew up in Athens, and
Yes.
now you live on Crete for many years. Can we speak about the culture, because Crete was a very interesting crossroads culturally for many years, different empires and different from the. I I've never been to Greece, so maybe you can just speak to the history a
Yes.
little bit.
Yes, Crete is a quite unique place, I find. It doesn't feel like other islands of Greece. I think it has a very special. Okay, it might resemble a little bit Kassos and Karpathos, which are on the east part of the island. But, Crete, for example, in comparison to Corfu, is a different country. Completely
Mm-hmm.
different. Corfu is an island in the Ionian Island, Greek island, but completely different. And as you say, because there was the Ottoman Empire as well as the Hellenic Venetian times,
Mm-hmm.
there is an interesting combination of the East and the West. Very interesting combination of these two. Crete is mostly, although it's an island, it's a very long and thin island. We have the sea all around it, and you would think that people are seamen or fishermen, or no, they're mostly in the mountains. Most of
Mm-hmm.
Cretan culture is built in the mountains. So most, how can I say, agriculture and economy is on shepherds and agriculture in the
Mm-hmm.
mainland, not so much around the sea. Around the sea, what happened is tourism. And this is, I
Okay.
think, because people in the past were trying to protect themselves from the pirates from the sea. So they all
Mm-hmm.
gathered in the mainland, and this is where they created most of their culture. And in the past, like in the 40s and the 50s, fathers that had property in the mountains and by the sea, so the sons would inherit the good
Mm-hmm.
land, and the daughters would inherit from their fathers the bad, let's say, not fertile land by the sea.
Mm-hmm.
But what happened a few decades later was that tourism became so, fertile on Crete that the sons-in-law, the ones that married these daughters, uh, created, very big fortunes, because Crete today is very touristic, very, very touristic place. Unfortunately, with very bad aesthetics as well in most parts of the island, especially
Mm-hmm.
by the sea, especially the north part of the island that was more developed. Unfortunately, there is a lot of bad aesthetics, a lot of touristic areas that have nothing to do with the culture of Crete. There are, of course, some really nice areas, but the real Crete, the culture, the good food, and the nature, I
Mm-hmm.
find that it is mostly in the inland of the island.
Mm-hmm.
There are some beautiful areas in the south, coastline in the south, which have not been developed so much touristically. The music of Crete, the Cretan lira is not as old as most people think. The oldest Cretan lira we have in a museum in Athens is from 1743. That is only 18th century. 18th century. Before the lira, they used to play reeds, flutes, little reeds, and percussion instruments, barrel drums, like small dowels. The lira and the lauto came much later. The lauto is the accompaniment instrument of the lira. It came even later, in the 19th century. I think maybe the beginning of the 20th century. They are very contemporary instruments. And we don't really know exactly from where they came. Because liras we had in various parts of, we still have in various parts of Greece, but the first record of lira, the first archive of lira, was in the 10th century in Thrace, in North Greece, very, very far from Crete. And I don't know if the Cretan lira came from this lira, from the Thracian lira, or from the east. I don't know. There were many bowed instruments, knee fiddles in the east anyway. To be honest, I don't know. There hasn't not been much musicological research on Cretan music, not official musicological research. What else do you want to know about the Cretan culture? The food is great.
Yeah. I was interested in the dialect because I understand the dialect is one of the oldest, closer to ancient Greek. And do you speak the dialect at all?
In some villages here, when they speak between themselves, older people, and when they speak fast, there are a lot of words I don't recognize, but I can understand. So it's not I don't know if it's a dialect or if it's an idiom, because there is a difference between these two. A dialect, I think, it's a completely different, like a different language, like it is, for example, Cypriot. In Cyprus, I don't understand anything. It's Greek, but it's a different, completely different dialect. I think that the Cretan language, at least the one that you hear in villages today, is an idiom, small idiom. So you understand, but there are different words, just a few different words. So I live here, and I understand, and I've gotten used to this vocabulary, most of this vocabulary. There are still words I don't recognize, but somebody from Athens might have a hard time understanding. Yes, but I don't. I think I have an accent sometimes because I speak to a lot of Cretan people, and maybe I have an accent because you get it like a disease. If you speak all day and you listen to this all day, like music, I think I get an accent when I speak with Cretan people. But I don't know. I don't use these words because I didn't grow up. I didn't grow up here, and I didn't. It doesn't come naturally to me. But you're right. These words, a lot of these words come from ancient Greek, from the ancient Greek language. But in music, in language of Cyprus, the Cypriot language, and the language of Pontus, the Black Sea. They also speak a Greek dialect. It's really, really influenced. There are a lot of words and grammar from ancient Greece, much, much more than the Cretan dialect or idiom. Also, in Cretan language, we have a lot of Turkish words, a lot. We use a lot of Turkish words which have been Cretanized, they have been changed a little bit, but if you see the root is Turkish, from the Turkish occupation, Ottoman occupation.
Kelly, I was wondering about the food. Are there traditional dishes you could describe for us that you love?
A lot. We have to make another episode about it. As I said, Crete is an island, and one would think that the fish would be, or seafood would be, some of the main dishes on a Cretan table, but it's not true. People here eat a lot of meat, a lot of lamb. They eat pork as well, but the local meat is lamb, a lot of lamb. There are a lot of shepherds with very good lamb. So if you are vegan or vegetarian, you will have a hard time, unfortunately, on Crete today. Because in the past there was a lot of, also today there is a lot of very good vegetarian food, and people used to eat meat very rarely because it was not something that only rich people could eat meat often. But today, unfortunately, people eat a lot of meat. They make a special way to bake it. They call it Adikristo. It sounds like Antichrist, but it has nothing to do with it. Adikristo in Greek means facing, one facing each other. This is what it means, Antichristo. So they put the lamp, they have a fire in the middle, and they put the lamp standing like this around the fire, like a tent, and this is the traditional way to cook meat. So they eat a lot of meat. They have a lot of very good cheese and yogurt and dairy products. And there is a lot of very good vegetarian food, but people nowadays tend to put the focus on meat. So if you go to a Cretan house, if you don't eat meat, they take it maybe not as an insult, maybe it's a strong word to say, but they feel that they feed you only if you eat meat. If you only eat the vegetarian, beautiful, very, very nice delicacies they have, they feel that they haven't fed you. We have a lot of horta, we call it. They're vegetables, green, just green vegetables, wild from the fields, wild. In the winter, we have fantastic, many, many different kinds of these horta, greens. And we have also a lot of Turkish versions of recipes, Cretan versions of Turkish recipes, like for example dolma, and yeah, many, many, many things.
Okay. So you've traveled a lot, both with your Toxo and with Ross, and I know you've played major halls all over. And you had a pretty memorable trip when you went to Australia the first time.
Oh
Was it
yes.
the Womadelaide Festival or a different one?
First time, oh no, no Woman Delight, no. First time was many years before that. First time I think
Mm.
was 2001. Woman Delight was 2010. First time was 2001 when we first went to Australia. It was an invitation from a very, very good friend of ours, an amazing person, a wonderful musician called Philip Griffin. And he invited us to go to Australia. For me, Australia was like going to Mars, really. It was no different, no difference in the other side of the world. To go to Australia to play with some other musicians, Lindsay Pollack and Tunji Bayer. So we would play as a quartet, and we landed in Brisbane, I think. And Philip, uh, so we landed, and Philip came to take us by car to take us to a place called Kim Kim, somewhere in the middle of nowhere. We had no idea where this was. And he took us by a van from the airport. And I remember it was night, so we couldn't see outside. I had still had not seen Australia. We landed and it was dark. And we went into this van, and I remember Philip was driving, and at some point he stopped the car, and he had the lights on, and on the street there was a snake, a big snake. And I see Philip coming out of the car, taking the snake with his two hands and taking it aside on the side of the road, not to run over it. And it bit him. It bit him on. I was like, oh my God, where did they bring us? What is this? What is this place? Anyway, that was my welcome first moments of Australia. Philip is a man that loves nature. He loves birds and frogs and snakes. He's an Australian that is real, he's there, he's in the nature, he loves his nature, and he's one with it. He's an unbelievable person, an unbelievable lover of nature and of life, and an amazing musician. He's a very special combination of Western and Eastern music. Apparently, he had listened to Ross's music and he had fallen in love with it, as many of us have. And he had started to practiced lauto and the oud, and I don't know where they met, if they had met before.
Yeah, if I could just say, because my episode with Philip will be coming out. Yeah, so he speaks about this. I believe it was in Berlin that he met Ross for the
Yes,
first time, and he
right.
spoke about inviting you both to come to Australia.
Yes, because
And
Tunji Bayer was in Berlin, right? Tunji, the percussionist, was in Berlin. But
yeah, and actually,
yes.
Lindsay Pollock,
Mm.
for people that missed my episode with him, he's the one who said that I've got to interview Kelly Toma. So that's the connection there.
Yes. So Philip apparently knew a lot of the repertoire of Ross, and yes, as you say, they met in Berlin, and that's how we got this invitation. Thank God, because these trips in Australia are like a hallmark in my musical life for many reasons. And yes, we arrived in Kin Kin, and there was Lindsay Pollack, another phenomenon, an unbelievable musician as well. He plays wind instruments. I'm sure if you have made an episode with him, you will know a lot about his work and what he does. And Tunji Bayer, a wonderful percussionist. And as I keep on saying, all of them unbelievable people. I mean, what I remember from all these trips to Australia, of course, it's the music, all this collaboration with these people, wonderful concerts, wonderful audience, so many things I learned, so many things I had to memorize, and all this eager to perform and all this. But all these experiences with these specific people. I mean, these these people are the core of these experiences. If it was not Tunji and Philip and Lindsay, all would have been different. Anyway, so I remember this first year of making our first tour in Australia. Okay, I was in a dream, really. All this was in a dream. When we went to Lindsay's house in Kin Kin, we basically went into a forest. He lived in a forest, in a beautiful wooden house with snakes and spiders and frogs and unbelievable. And we were rehearsing there all day, learning new music, trying to memorize, to create an ensemble, because we were not an ensemble. We had to become a team, to orchestrate, to arrange the pieces, to improvise, to interact with each other. And we really, in this house, in this wonderful environment, being so far from home, um, really something very magical happened. And we toured. I don't remember exactly where we went the first year, because we repeated this tour a few times actually. But what I remember very clearly, because I had already started performing with Ross in Greece and in other parts of, also in Europe, what I remember very clearly about performing in Australia was this feeling of performing for audiences that are listening to this music for the first time. And this is very special, because when we perform in Greece, when we perform in Europe, or in places where they know Ross's music or my music, it's a totally different experience. You already have an element, common element. The audience is familiar to what they're listening to, even just a little bit. So you are starting from somewhere. When you are performing for audiences that are listening to this for the first time, or are seeing these instruments for the first time, and they have no connotations, no ready uh, conclusions, yes, preconceptions, it's quite interesting to try to offer this to such a pure, um, such a virgin, in a way, audience. I think it is a very interesting experience, both for the audience and for the musician. One concert we did in the inside the little the forest where the house was. How do you call this very big thing? Reeds, yes, yes. Lindsay had thousands of reeds in his field. This big, very big property. And there was one part of the property where there was a circle that was empty. There were no reeds, but there were reeds around it, and it made like a tent. How can we call this? And there was a in the middle. You could see the sky. So we played there a concert in a little like kiosk. They had made a little kiosk, and we performed in that kiosk for friends that came with their blankets, with their pillows. For me, all this was so new to play my little lira there with what I knew so far and with these musicians for people that I mean I didn't know them, they didn't know me, they didn't know the music. It must have been as magical for them as it was for me. I will never forget. I will never forget these experiences in Australia. I think it was the most remote place I had played so far, and it was really special.
And I was curious also about is it pronounced Womadelaide Festival?
Adelaide, I think it's called Adelaide. Adelaide is a big company that they do big festivals all around the world, and they do it. I think they've done it in London, in other parts of Europe, in America. And that year, in 2010, I think it was, they did it in Adelaide and New Zealand. The year we visited, and yes, Ross was invited to play in this. And it was Ross, myself, and Psara Yorgos Xylouris from Greece, from Crete, Lauto player and singer, and we played with a man from Australia, Paddy Montgomery, and a wonderful musician. He was very young back then, very very good musician, and we played both in Adelaide, in Adelaide, and New Zealand. We did the same festival in New Zealand that year. Also, very remote place. For us, to travel from Crete to New Zealand, it's the other side of the world.
Yeah. So when the pandemic hit and you couldn't travel and you couldn't
Yes,
see people, when we spoke before, you told me that the online teaching kind of became some of your social life, which I found as well.
yes. The pandemic. I'm not embarrassed to say, but in the beginning, I was avoiding to say that. Pandemic, the first months were paradise for us. I know that a lot of people suffered. I know that it was a big disaster. A lot of people were having a very hard time. People, locked in their apartments and not knowing what to do and all this panic. But for me as a musician, I said, oh my God, I'm going to be at home. I'm not going to travel. I have my instrument. I'm going to practice. I'm going to just play for myself with no specific goal. Practice because I love it. Learn new things. It was a paradise for me, especially the first year, all the first lockdown. Both me and Ross, we enjoyed it very, very much. We are so privileged, of course, because we live in a house. We don't live in an apartment. We live on Crete. I mean, being locked down on Crete is not the worst thing that can happen to you. And yeah, we felt very, very privileged. We had a wonderful time. We learned a lot. I studied a lot online, various things. I did some online workshops, and of course, we were all shocked by what was happening. But in many ways, in many levels, it was so liberating. As an artist, I felt that, and as a human as well. I mean, I was going out. Everything was so quiet. You could feel that the nature was different. I was imagining that no airplanes were flying over. I was imagining the life of birds. I was imagining how different this must have been for nature in general, and it was a kind of metaphysical experience. How can I say? I don't know. It was very very interesting. Of course, slowly, slowly, the second lockdown, I started to feel locked down. But this first year, as I said, I learned a lot, and I studied a lot how to become a teacher. Because teaching online, I find it in some ways much more challenging than teaching in person. So I managed to find new ways to try to project the information. trying to, yes, to be more analytical. I realized that some things we should not take for granted as teachers or as students as well, and that you have to explain and break things into pieces and try to project it to, I don't know, wherever this other person in front of you is, in a room in New York. From you are here in Archanis and you're trying to teach a Cretan Sirton to somebody in New Mexico, and you really want this, you have this eager to do it. You don't know how, you have to find different ways. And technology actually gave me a lot of tools which I didn't use before. For example, when I teach in person, if I want to keep the rhythm, I just stab my foot to help the student be on time. But when you are teaching online, you cannot do that because there is this delay. So I used metronomes. I recorded on my own, or by myself. I recorded drums on various rhythms, which I played along from here while we were playing together with their microphones muted. Anyway, to cut the story short, I'm saying that we found so many different ways to use technology for the benefit of teaching, and and it's something that I still use now, even in person classes. And of course, because I taught so much, I had so many students. Everybody that was sending a message about having Lyra classes with me, I said yes, 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 because it was my social life, and it was my only income also. But it was so enjoyable, to meet my friends and meet basically friends, and play and just play my Lyra, what I would do anyway on my own, and learning how to become a constructive teacher. How to become a teacher that sees some results. And it was very, very interesting for me. Very interesting. Very interesting. And I think I have, yes, developed this muscle of teaching, and I feel more confident now, even in person classes. I feel more confident. I have seen what works better, what doesn't work, or and now I see the different types of students, because, as I told you, there are so many different types of students. I see their level, I recognize their levels easier, and I see what they need. It was a fantastic experience for me, all this teaching online.
I just wanted to circle back, Kelly, to Ralu Manu dance, because I was looking her up, and for people who are not from Greece or not in the dance world, it's quite interesting. If you want to speak to her school briefly and what she did for Greek culture, I found it interesting.
Ralu Manu was a very interesting and very important figure in dance culture in Greece. But unfortunately, the years that I joined this school, she was already dead, of course, and how can I say, her light had faded out. The school where I went, unfortunately, I have to say, and I think some of my classmates will agree, was a very old-fashioned school. They were trying to keep the the glamour, how can I say? They were trying to keep the light of Ralu Manu, but she was not there. They had distorted a little bit, her work. And unfortunately, this school, although I got a lot from very good teachers from there, we had some very good teachers, but the school as a school, I'm going to say something now that I don't know how it sounds in English, but it smelled like naphthalene. Naphthalene is this material that we put in wardrobes to keep the insects away.
Oh,
Oh,
mothballs.
yes,
That's the chemical.
it
Yeah.
smells like this, it smells like an old wardrobe. Unfortunately. This woman was very powerful. She did some wonderful collaborations with, for example, Manos Hadjidakis, composer that at the time was very um, creative. But it was just an era, a time that had finished, and there were not enough people or enough inspiring people to take this forward. So unfortunately, when I joined, and this is the reason why I think I gave up dancing, because there were not enough inspiring experiences and enough inspiring people, artists in this school or around me about dance to motivate me to go forward. This is what happened with me. And on the contrary, in music, at the same time, there was so much inspiration, so much freshness, so much creativity happening, not only from Rose, but through Rose's cycle, through all these musicians that I met in Labyrinth, and through all this new world that had opened for me with music, that I saw this unbalanced, this difference between what was happening with me about dance. It was all becoming heavier and heavier and no motivation. And the other thing was so elevating, and so I saw that there was future there for me. Whereas in dance, if I didn't just, finish that school and leave and go abroad somewhere in Europe, if I didn't go in search of something new and fresh, here I would just be drowned in that mothball wardrobe forever. Yes, I'm really sad to talk this way about my school, but this is the truth. This is the truth, and I see it very clearly because I saw the contrast. I had some very good teachers there, very inspiring. They taught me discipline. They taught me a lot of things. I still love dance a lot, and I remember them. I really appreciate them. I appreciate all this work they did, but it was not enough for me. Our school was, to one example of why I felt like that is because we never. I studied 3 years in this professional dance school. I studied many years before, from 6 until 18. I studied with another teacher, much more inspiring actually, to be honest. Anna Peppa is her name. She was much more inspiring from 6 to 18 with her. And we did a lot of performances. Every summer we did two, three performances all together, the students in very beautiful theaters. We had costumes, and we in the performances we saw what all this was about, why we were on the bar all day, and why we were sweating. Why? The reason why was to perform this art. So after my 18th year, when I entered the Ralou Manu Dance School, I studied 3 years, and this was a professional school, 3 years, and we did not even one performance. Not even one performance. And this was so disappointing for me. Their excuse was that they did not get enough sponsorship from the from the government, or I don't know. There were all excuses and all this depressive atmosphere, which made me, that this is not inspiring for a young artist, for somebody that is studying, somebody who is studying something. They have to see this light. They have to be in a tunnel and see something, uh, going towards something. I didn't see anything there. I just saw, okay, discipline, 6 hours a day in that school, studying classical ballet and contemporary dance, all this beautiful. Studying also anatomy and the history of dance and history of arts and many other things, rhythm, music. But no, there, we didn't see the point as students in that school. Yes.
I find that very interesting as a music teacher, because I did not have enough opportunity to perform growing up, for sure. Even in university, even doing performance degree, the very few opportunities, you have to kind of create them. So I very much as a teacher create a lot of opportunities for my students to play concerts and play with other musicians. I think it's so important, but I think that's maybe not, there isn't enough opportunity. People don't realize how important it is to share your music and have that feeling with an audience. They feel like they're never ready or it's never perfect enough.
It is so important. I mean, I find this with music, for example, on the other side of my dance experience. I started performing much before I was ready, you know. But this made me a musician. You cannot. When are you ready? If you wait to be ready, what does it mean ready? Okay, maybe in classical Western music, things are more structured, things are more specific. I mean, to go out in an audience and play this specific composition of Bach, for example, you have to have a specific level because if you are performing in this venue is for this level of musicians or this audience are expect. But in our music, things are not so strict. And if you have a teacher like Ross, such inspiring and clever and generous teacher, you have the opportunity to perform next to him because it's not only me. So many students of Ross, we performed with him in professional concerts long before we were ready. I mean, now we see the videos or we listen to the recordings, and I say to Ross, Ross, why did you, why did you take me to this concert? I mean, and he said, no, it was very good. Oh, not only for you, it was very good for me. It was very good for the audience. I mean, he could see beyond uh, the perfect playing. You know, these experiences made me a musician and many other students. It's so important to study with a goal, to practice and have a goal, have a motivation. It's also important to start to practice without a goal. As I say, in Corona, during COVID, I liked practicing without having a specific goal. Like I'm not practicing for a specific concert, and I like that. Just keeping up, or just practicing because I love it. But as a student, you really need to perform because this is an art. It's an art. You have to share it. If you don't share it, if you don't try to project it, maybe to your friends, it doesn't have to be a theater full of people. Just for your dogs, for somebody. Somebody has to listen to you. Music is something generally art is something you address to to not necessarily to a human. I don't know. Maybe you to something sacred, but you really have to find a way. You have to find an addresser. You have to project it to someone. Maybe sometimes I think about it. Uh, Maybe there is a level of musicality, or there is a level of musicians that are much higher than me that don't need that. Maybe it's a different level, but for me, it's important to be able to address it. I want to share it. But maybe there is another level that maybe they address it to what they call God, just that, and it's enough for them. I don't know. But for me, it's quite important. I really need it, and I find it very. I love performing. I find joy out of it, and I play differently when somebody is listening.
I put so much into the series because I feel so strongly that musical is our best language as
Hmm.
humans. And there's such an incredible depth and variety to music all over the world, and so many ways you can be a musician. So
Yes.
it's such a joy to speak to you about this.
Hmm.
So if people want to go to Crete in the summer and do your course through the musical labyrinth, I notice you do a group
Hmm.
where it's many. So you have like a morning and an evening session doing tunes with you. And is there like a little performance at the end of that week together, or how does that work?
In Labyrinth, what we do, since Labyrinth on Crete started in 2002, so it's already 21 years that it's functioning here on Crete. These seminars, as you say, they are week seminars, mostly in the summer, but we also do some winter series as well. And as you say, it's 3 hours in the morning, 3 hours in the evening. Very often it goes more than that. So we just have time in the middle to have lunch. But officially, it is 3 hours in the morning and 3 hours in the evening of various different subjects. We have many, many different musicians coming from all over the world of various genres, various model traditions, mostly model traditions. And the teacher, the seminar I teach this year, I teach Lyra technique sometimes, I teach Cretan music sometimes, but this one that I will do this year is about ensemble playing, just repertoire, which we play on the Lyra with sympathetic strings. So the students that come to these seminars, these workshops of mine, can come with various different instruments. But I note down that I I can help more students that play both instruments. So other instruments can come as well. In the past, I've done with percussions and a lot of plucked instruments, and we create an ensemble. But the ones that are playing both instruments will probably benefit more because I can explain more things about bowing, about phrasing, how I phrase, how I express some phrases in melodies and all this. Yes, in the end, most of the times we have little concerts that we play amongst friends or amongst the other students for the other students that are in other seminars. But this year, also last year, we did the same. Apart from Houdetsi, which is the village where Labyrinth is, the Cretan Labyrinth is all these years, we will also have seminars in another village called Danoia, in another village on Crete called Danoia, because unfortunately in our village we had a massive earthquake in 2021, and a lot of the accommodation and a lot of facilities were destroyed. So we don't have enough accommodation facilities to have all the seminars we want in the same village. So that's why my workshop this year will be in Anoia, where we collaborate with the municipality there, who has been very helpful, and for venues for the workshops, they have given us some very special rooms which are called mitata. Mitata are like stone igloos, which are the houses of shepherds. So they're like igloos, but with stones with one hole on the top, on the ceiling, and they're very cool. They have the perfect temperature. They're a bit dark, but very very charming. And this is where we will do them. In terms of performing in Labyrinth, of course we have this other wonderful idea of Ros, who is the artistic director there, of creating an orchestra. We have an orchestra called Mythos Orchestra, which is a number of students, some of our best students of Labyrinth. Every year, the people change, but the number is almost always the same, around 10, 12 musicians, and they are all students of Labyrinth, very good, who are now very good musicians, and they stay in the village of Houdetsi. They stay for 2 months, and they perform every week 2 or 3 concerts with the teachers that are coming to teach every given week the seminars of our program. So it's very very interesting for them because they explore different genres, different kind of musicians, different kind of creators, different kind of composers. I mean, different styles. They have to rediscover their instruments and they have to perform that. They have to project this to an audience in very good venues with very knowledgeable audience, because the audience here, we have trained them, with all this music, all these years. They're quite, sometimes they're quite demanding. Very very interesting.
Okay, fascinating. Well, there's I hope some listeners will check out everything will be linked, of course, in the description.
Yeah.
So I wanted to thank you so much for your sharing your stories and your music today. It was absolutely wonderful.
Thank you very much. It was very enjoyable. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. Thanks for following the series on your favorite podcast player and sharing your favorite episodes with your friends. all of which help find new listeners. I have lots more episodes coming in this season 3 with a fascinating diversity of musicians and their stories and music. Have a great week.